Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Combat Conversations. And the reason why I've got this in my hand is because I have lost the magnet for it that attaches it to me normally. So apologies about that, but yeah, we do what we can. Um, so today's episode. Today's episode is a little bit of a well, I've been saying this a lot recently, but a little bit more of a deep one again. And I know I say this sometimes, but this one is genuinely something that I think a lot of women feel, but don't always know how to say out loud. The topic one on the poll for the episode today was when you don't recognize the woman you've become and how to start finding her again. And I think the reason the that this one is because it touches something real. Because there are a lot of women walking around right now who are just functioning. They're getting things done. They're going to work. They're sorting the house. They're checking on the kids. They're looking after parents. They're replying to messages. They're doing the shopping. All these things, but underneath all that is a quiet feeling of I don't really know who I am anymore. And that can be a horrible feeling because it's not always dramatic. It's not always a breakdown. It's not always Well, yeah, it's not always crying on the kitchen floor. Sometimes it's just catching yourself looking in the mirror and thinking, when did I start looking this tired? Or trying clothes on and thinking, this doesn't feel like me anymore. Or seeing an old photo and thinking, I remember her, I remember that woman, but I don't feel like her now. And this is what I want to talk about today. Not in a fluffy way, not in a just love yourself way, but because I know that sometimes those phrases can feel empty when you're the one actually living it. I want to talk about why this happens and why so many women go through this, especially after years of putting everyone else first. And most importantly, how you can slowly start finding yourself again. Not only by becoming a completely different person, but by coming back to the parts of you that have just been pushed down, ignored, or forgotten for a while. And I think one of the hardest parts of all of this is it doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly think, right, I've completely lost myself. It usually creeps in slowly. A bit of tiredness here, a bit of weight gain there, a few months of not exercising, a few years of putting your own needs last, a decade of being mum first, partner second, employee third, daughter fourth, friend fifth, and somewhere way further down that line is you. And because it happens slowly, you almost don't notice it at first. You just adapt. You start wearing clothes that feel safer than rather than clothes that make you feel good. You stop taking photos of yourself. You stop saying yes to things because you don't feel confident. You just adapt. And then one day it hits you. Maybe the kids need you less. Maybe they've left the home. Maybe your routine changes. Maybe you have more quiet time than you're used to. Maybe you look around and you think, I've spent years building around up and around everybody else's life, but what about mine? And that question can feel really terrifying because when you've been needed for so long, not being needed in the same way can feel like you've lost a role, a definite, well, a part of you. And when you lose a role, it can make you question your identity. Who am I now? What do I actually enjoy? What do I want my life to look like? When did I stop feeling like me? That's not silly. That's not dramatic. That's just real. And I think a lot of women just brush it off because they think, well, other people have it worse, or I should just be grateful. And yes, you can be grateful for your family, your kids, your life, your home, and still feel like you've lost a part of yourself. Both things can be true. You can love your children more than anything and still miss the woman you were before everything became about everyone else. You can be proud of the life you've built and still feel sad that you stopped looking after yourself inside of it. That doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. And I really want to say this clearly. If you don't recognize yourself right now, it doesn't mean that you've failed. It doesn't mean that you're lazy. It doesn't mean that you've let yourself go because you don't care. It doesn't mean you're weak. It usually means you've been in survival mode for too long. And survival mode doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes survival mode looks like being the reliable one, the strong one, the one who keeps everything together, the one who says, I'm fine even when you're absolutely exhausted, the one who carries the mental load, the one who notices when the fridge is empty, when someone's birthday's coming up, when the washing needs doing, when someone seems a bit off. when the calendar is full, when the dog needs to go to the vet, when the kids need the support, when your partner needs help, and you're carrying all of that. Yeah, when you're carrying all of that, your own needs start to feel optional. Exercise becomes optional, proper food becomes optional, confidence becomes optional. Your body becomes something you drag through the day rather than something you actually live in. And then people say you need to put yourself first. But for a lot of women, that doesn't feel simple because you've spent years being rewarded for putting yourself last. People rely on you, people expect you to be available, people assume you'll sort it. And maybe deep down, you've even built a part of your identity around being the one who copes. So when you start thinking about changing it, it can feel uncomfortable because suddenly you're not just changing your habits, you're challenging the role that you've been playing for years. And that is why just go to the gym isn't always enough because it this isn't just about weight loss. It's not just about clothes, it's not just about fitness, it's not just about identity. It's about looking at your life and thinking, I want to feel like I belong to myself again. And that's a big thing, and it deserves more than just a simple quick fix. Now, this might sound a bit heavy, but I think this matters. There can be real grief in missing the woman you used to be, and people don't talk about that enough. Because when you look back at the old version of yourself, it's not always about wanting to be younger. It's not always about wanting to have the exact same body. It's not about pretending life hasn't changed. Sometimes you miss sometimes what you miss is the feeling. You miss feeling lighter, you miss feeling more connected. You miss getting ready and actually liking what you saw in the mirror. You miss laughing without overthinking yourself. You miss having energy. You miss having something that was yours, that bit of spark. And when you feel like that's gone, it can feel sad. But I want you to be careful with how you speak to yourself in that place because a lot of women look back and use the old version of themselves as a weapon. They'll say, "Oh, look how much better I used to look. I can't believe I've let myself go this far. I used to be so much slimmer. I used to actually make an effort. I've ruined it." And obviously, I get why those thoughts come up, but they don't help you come back. They just keep you stuck in shame and this rut. And shame is a horrible place to try and rebuild from because it makes you hide. Shame makes you avoid. Shame makes you think, what's the point? Shame makes you start extreme plans on Monday and give up by Thursday because the whole thing is built on punishment. And you cannot hate yourself into a life that you actually enjoy. You might be able to force yourself for a bit. You might lose a few pounds, few, a few pounds through guilt. You might punish yourself through a few workouts. But long term, it's not going to last because the goal cannot be, I need to fix myself because I'm disgusting. The goal has to become, I deserve to feel better than this. That's a completely different energy, a completely different way of thinking. One is punishment and the other is care. And care, I promise you, will take you much further. When women decide they want to change, they often think they need a massive life overhaul. A new diet, gym 5 times a week, no alcohol, no chocolate, 10,000 steps a day, meal prep every meal, wake up at 5 a.m., a new routine, new personality. And I understand the temptation, and I've done this before. Because when you feel uncomfortable in yourself, you want it fixed now. You want it fixed straight away. You want to wake up next week and feel different. But the problem is when the plan is too far away from your actual life, you're not going to stick to it, are you? And then you just don't feel like the plan has failed. You feel like you failed. So I want to offer you a different way of looking at it. Finding yourself again does not start with becoming perfect. It starts with building up evidence. Tiny pieces of evidence to say, I am someone who keeps promises to herself. That's where confidence comes from. Not from shouting affirmations in the mirror, not from pretending everything is fine. Confidence comes from proof. And the proof starts small. You said you'd go for a 20-minute walk and you did. You said you'd drink more water today and you did. You said you'd get some protein in with breakfast and you did. You said you'd do a short workout even if you didn't feel like it and you did. You said you'd stop scrolling and go to bed a bit earlier and you did. That might sound basic, but when you've spent a long time breaking promises to yourself, keeping smaller ones matters because you're rebuilding trust with yourself and that's huge. A lot of women don't lack motivation, they lack self trust. They've started and stopped so many times that deep down they don't believe themselves anymore. They say, this is the week. But part of them is already thinking, you know, you've said that before. So the answer isn't to make a bigger promise. It's actually to start by making a smaller promise and actually keeping it. And that's how you start finding her again. You don't need to become unrecognizable. You need to become reliable to yourself again. Now, this is another big one. A lot of women wait to feel ready. They wait for life to calm down. They wait for work to be less busy. They wait till after the weekend, after the holiday, after the kids are sorted, and wait until they feel motivated. They wait until they feel more energy. But readiness is a bit of a trap because often you don't feel ready until after you've started. Energy often comes after movement. Confidence comes after action. Motivation comes after progress. You want to feel like the woman you want to become, you start acting like her in small ways, and then slowly you begin to feel her coming back. That might even mean going for a walk even when you can't be bothered. It might mean booking the class even though you're nervous. It might mean asking for help instead of trying to figure this out all alone. It might mean saying no to something so you can say yes to yourself. It might mean putting your gym clothes on and doing a 10-minute workout. It might mean eating a proper meal instead of picking at leftovers and calling it lunch. And obviously, I know these things sound simple, but simple doesn't mean easy, especially when you're used to abandoning yourself. So don't underestimate the power of small actions done consistently. That's not boring, that's how you rebuild. When you don't recognize yourself, it's easy to make your body the enemy. You start fighting it, hiding it, criticizing it, comparing it, picking it apart, the stomach, the arms, the legs, the face, the clothes that don't sit right, the photos you don't want to be in. And I'm not going to sit here and say, just love every inch of yourself, because honestly, for some people, that feels too far away right now. But maybe the first step isn't loving your body. Maybe the first step is stopping the war with it. Because your body has carried you through a lot. It's got you through stress, it's got you through motherhood. It's got you through long days. It's got you through years where you probably didn't rest enough, didn't fuel yourself properly, didn't speak to yourself kindly, and you still expected it to keep going. So maybe instead of saying, I hate my body, you start saying, my body is asking me to look after it again. That shift matters because then exercise stops being punishment. It then becomes support. Food stops being something to control, it becomes fuel. Rest stops feeling lazy, it becomes necessary. And progress stops being about trying to erase yourself. It becomes about coming home to yourself. And that's the difference. And now, this is a point and something that I want every woman listening to hear. You're allowed to want more for yourself. You're allowed to want to feel more confident. You're allowed to want to lose weight. You're allowed to want to feel more attractive. You're allowed to want to get stronger. You're allowed to want time for yourself. You're allowed to want the life that isn't just based around what everyone else needs from you. That doesn't make you vain. That doesn't make you selfish. That doesn't mean you love your family any less. In fact, I'd argue actually the opposite. When you feel better in yourself, you show up better everywhere. You have more patience, more energy, more presence, more self respect, more life in you. And I think that's a bit that people miss. The journey isn't about becoming obsessed with yourself, it's about remembering that you matter too. Because for years, maybe you've been the person everyone else leans on, but who have you been leaning on? Who have you been putting your, well, yeah, where have you been putting your needs? When was the last time you had a goal that excited you? When was the last time you did something that made you feel proud of yourself? When was the last time you looked at your own future and thought, you know what? I'm excited for what's next. If the answer is, I don't know, then maybe this is your sign. Not to panic, not to overhaul everything, but to start. So, as 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 usual, let's make this practical because I don't want this episode to just make you think I want to give you somewhere to start. If you're listening and thinking, that's me, I don't recognize myself anymore, here's where I'd begin. First, stop trying to fix everything at once. Pick one promise, just one. Something small enough that you can actually do it even in a busy day. This could be, you know what, I'm going for a 20-minute walk today. I'm going to eat a proper breakfast with protein. I'm going to drink 2 liters of water. I'm going to do 3 short workouts this week, 10 to 15 minutes. Or I'm going to go to bed without scrolling for an hour. One promise, and then keep it. Not because that one thing will change your life overnight, but because it starts rebuilding the relationships that you have with yourself. Second, stop speaking to yourself like someone you hate. You might not feel confident yet. You might not love who you are, but you can still choose not to be cruel to yourself. When you catch yourself saying, I've let myself go, try changing to, I've had a lot going on, and now I'm ready to look after myself again. When you catch yourself saying, I look awful, try, you know what, I'm not feeling my best right now, but I'm taking steps to change that. That might feel small, but it matters because the way you speak to yourself becomes the atmosphere you live in. Third, move your body before you feel like it. Don't wait for motivation. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait until you feel confident enough to start. Start with what you can do, whether that be a walk, a home workout, a gym session, a class, anything. Because movement reconnects you with your body. And when you've spent a lot of time feeling disconnected from yourself, that matters. Fourth, get around people who remind you of what's possible. This is massive because if you're trying to change in an environment where nobody supports it, it becomes way, way harder. You need people who don't make you feel silly for wanting more. You need people who understand why this matters. You need people who don't just say you're fine as you are, when deep down you know you don't feel fine. And that's not because they're wrong for loving you as you are, because sometimes you need people who can say, I see you, I know you're capable of more, let's go. That support matters, accountability matters, and community matters. Because when you've lost belief in yourself, sometimes you need to borrow beliefs from someone else until yours comes back. And fifth, start asking yourself better questions. Not what's wrong with me, but what do I need? Not why am I like this, but what would help me feel a bit more like myself today? Not how did I get this bad, but what is the right next step? Better questions lead to better actions, and better actions slowly build a better life. I think this is important. Finding yourself again doesn't mean going back to exactly who you were. You're not 25 anymore. Your life is different. Your body is probably different. Your priorities are different. Your responsibilities are different. And that's okay. The goal isn't to become the old you. The goal is to become a version of you that feels alive again now. A woman who has been through life, a woman who has raised children, handled stress, carried responsibility, and still gets to have a comeback. A woman who doesn't have to shrink into the background because she just got older. A woman who doesn't have to accept feeling uncomfortable forever. A woman who can decide, actually, I'm not done yet. Because you're not. You're not too old. You're not too far gone. You haven't missed your chance. I genuinely have a 69-year-old client on board at the moment, and she's lost, I think, 7 kilograms in 12 weeks. So you haven't missed your chance. And I know that might sound like something you'd expect me to say as a coach, but I genuinely do believe it, and I've seen it. I've seen women change, not because they suddenly became perfect, but because they finally decided to stop abandoning themselves. They stopped waiting. They stopped making themselves the last priority. They stopped saying one day, and they started taking action. Messy action, imperfect action, but action. And that's what changes things. Now, I want to finish with this. If you feel like you don't recognize yourself now, I know that can feel heavy. It can feel embarrassing. It can feel lonely. It can feel like everyone else has got themselves together and you're the only one struggling. But you are not the only one. So many women feel this. They don't just always say it, they hide it behind being busy. They hide it behind I'm fine. They hide it behind looking after everyone else. But underneath, they're tired. They miss themselves. They want to feel good again. They want to look in the mirror and not feel disappointed. They want to get dressed without stress. They want to feel proud. They want to feel confident. They want to feel like there is still part of life that belongs to them. And there is. The woman you miss, she's not gone. She might be buried under responsibility. She might be tired. She might be quieter than she used to be. She might need some care. She might need some structure, but she's still there. And you don't need to find her all at once. You find her in the walk you didn't want to do but did it anyway. You find her in the meal you made because you decided you were worth looking after. You find her in the workout where you felt nervous but you showed up. You find her in the moment you said no instead of overcommitting again. You find her in the small promises you keep. You find her in the days you choose not to give up on yourself. You start to recognize her again. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're finally showing up for yourself. And maybe that's where the comeback starts. Not with a dramatic transformation, not with a huge announcement, but with a quiet decision. I'm ready to start looking after me again. And if that's where you are right now, then I want you to know this. You don't have to do it perfectly, no way. You just have to start. So, if this episode hit home for you, I'd love for you to take one thing from it today. Just one. Ask yourself, what is one small promise that I can keep to myself today? Not next month, not when life calms down, today. And then keep it. And that's how you begin. And as always, if this episode resonated with you, send me a message, let me know what part hit home, or share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because I promise you, there are a lot more women feeling like this than you realise. And those of you in the WhatsApp group, there's over 300 of you in here now. And maybe this is the reminder that they're not stuck, they're not broken, and they're not too late. They're just ready for a comeback. Thanks for listening to the Comeback Conversations, and I will speak to you soon.